Life's tough. Get a helmet, man. I'm too pregnant for this.
Yeah, it's not that I don't think there should be interracial marriage. I'm Catholic, so as you know, it's not a sin to be in an interracial marriage or relationship. But I am racist, I would say. I believe in the races. I believe there are white people and black people and Hispanics and Asians, and I think that it's a core part of our identity. It's who we are. And there's like this conservative reflex to say, we're colorblind. Race doesn't mean anything. And, you know, Pat Buchanan said this. He said, it's not everything, but it isn't nothing. And I definitely lean more towards the latter, which is it really is a core part of who we are. Our culture, our heritage, our ancestors, our customs, all of it. You know, it's not that I don't think that two people can fall in love from different races. Of course they can. And they have throughout history. And the races have mixed throughout history and assimilated. But for someone like myself, I always say on my show, it's just my value. I want to marry someone that looks like me, that comes from a similar background, because I want my kids to look like me. I want my grandkids to look like me.
But are you, sorry, I just want to make sure, did you say I'm a racialist or I'm a racist?
You know, for a long time, I would say I'm racialist. Now I just say I'm racist.
Okay, so when you say you're racist, because these definitions get changed around, racist, you know, anti-Semitism gets expanded, what do you mean when you say I'm a racist? Because I think most people watching this would go, if you are a racist in the traditional sense of the term, why are you on this podcast, right? Wouldn't you just go, you know what, Candace is black and she's therefore I don't want to speak to her.
Right.
Certainly not going onto your show and saying, why won't Candace have me on? That doesn't really seem to line up with the traditional sense of the idea of racist, so.
Yeah, and I'm using it, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek. I mean, for the purpose of understanding, I'd say my views are I'm a racialist. But I do think that we need to deconstruct this idea of racism in the sense that, you know, look, you're black, I'm white. It is what it is. For my entire life, people have been walking around on eggshells about the subject of race, about white people being racist. Can I say this? Can I say that? Can I have this opinion? And me, I'm sort of, you know, Gavin McInnes said it like this. He said, you're kind of post-racist. You're sort of after this craze where everything was racist. It's sort of this recognition that we live in a heavily racial world. And, you know, look, sometimes we have racist feelings. Racist feelings like, I want to live in a white neighborhood. I don't want to live in a black neighborhood. If they were all like you, obviously it'd be a different story. But when we think of a black neighborhood, we know what that means and why the property value is cheap.
But that's black American. So this is why I want to understand this idea better because, and this is kind of something my cousin has said, which I guess you could say is a racist statement, but she says that white people in America are the white trash of white people in the world, meaning that like there's a special category of uniquely that you don't see when you're dealing with like white Americans here, that if you went across to just, I mean, like Switzerland, you wouldn't see this version of a white person necessarily, or this, you maybe went to the continent of Africa, you don't see this version of a black person either. Like even if you went to like to the tribes out in Africa that still exist, they would be a far cry from a black American living in a neighborhood in Compton, right? So I'm trying to understand if you're actually, you think that it's all black people are like this, or if your world is kind of colored by, this is what's going on in America, this has failed for 1,000 reasons. Welfarism has definitely, like, I mean, black people in 1940s, stand up. My grandfather, I talk about that denigration and the corrosion of culture. That's happening. White, black, whatever you want to name it, there is this intentional corrosion of culture. So do you think it's literally, well, this is just what a black person is when they come out? Or do you think that post welfare, LBJ, Great Society, this is what black Americans have become, and I have a right to respond to that and say that as a white man, I don't want to live there?
Well, you know, I think it's more nature than people would like to believe. You know, there's this classic tension of, is it nature, is it nurture, is it cultural, or is it intrinsic, is it racial? And I've always been on the latter side of this among conservatives. Conservatives like to say it's all culture. Black America is the way it is because of hip-hop music and the Great Society and that kind of stuff. And I think the uncomfortable reality is a big part of it is intrinsic. You know, one of the big arguments against the abolition of slavery in the 1860s is that, you know, when Europeans colonized Africa, they hadn't discovered the wheel. There's no two-story buildings. There's no writing. There's no written language. Missionaries had to go to Africa in the last century and invent it for the African people because there's no recorded history. They didn't have writing.
So Egypt is not in Africa.
Well, Egypt is a different race. The Egyptians were not black.
Okay, but you said when they went to Africa, so I just want to...
The interior of Africa in the late 19th century, scrambled for Africa.
So we're now knocking Egypt out of Africa.
Well, Egypt is part of northern Africa, sub-Saharan
Africa. You said Africa, so I'm not trying to get a gotcha. I'm just responding. You're saying Africa.
Sure. Yeah.
It's in Africa. It's Egypt. It's kind of ridiculous to say there was no written language. Well, so I'm just trying to get you to
sure.
You know,
Egyptians are not Africans.
If I'm not pushing back, the internet will. So
Egyptians are not racial Africans. When I say African, I'm saying sub-Saharan Africans.
Sub-Saharan. Okay.
Black people because it is a different race. In sub-Saharan Africa, and Europeans did not penetrate that until the late 19th century. They didn't have any of this. To the extent that you have infrastructure in Africa, it's from the Muslims in the Sahel and the Maghreb in northern Africa, where the Arabs colonized. And then you had, Carthage and Egypt, you had ancient civilizations. But sub-Saharan Africa, they didn't have that. You take these people out of that land and put them here, and they're enslaved people. You let them free in a modern, liberal republic. They're not going to succeed. It's not going to go well for them. And that was one of the arguments against abolition. People said if you free them without any assimilation, without any kind of process for them to be acclimated, they're going to die. And that's exactly what happened. Many of the bottom 10% of the lowest IQ Africans just died off for generations. And it had and pardon the expression, but it had a eugenic effect because over time, if the weakest are dying off, that's one argument for why blacks in America have a standard deviation higher IQ than the blacks in sub-Saharan Africa. So, so I do believe there is something intrinsic going on there. And what makes people uncomfortable about this is the idea that it's unchangeable.